Welcome everyone to another episode of Keto Chat. I am your host, Carole Freeman, and I'm a certified nutritionist. I'm the creator of the Fast Track to Keto Success program, and I'm here today with the one, the only Dr. Naisha Winters. And you're in Durango, Colorado, right?
In Durango, Colorado, beautiful part of the country.
How close is that to Denver?
Super far. We're actually closer to Phoenix than Denver. We're right in the corner.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool spot.
Oh, so you probably get all the best of the weather and everything like that out there.
Yeah. Kind of do. Don't tell anyone.
Oh man, I'm so excited to talk to you. I totally forgot about the formal part where I need to read your interview.
Hop in.
So let's do that part, and then we'll get into the fun of chatting with each other. So for those of you that don't know, Dr. Winters is the founder, CEO, and visionary of Optimal Terrain Consulting. And we're going to link in the show notes below to all of her things here. So she's a nationally board certified naturopathic doctor, licensed acupuncturist, and a fellow of the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. She lectures all over the world, training physicians in the application of mistletoe therapy. I bet you guys didn't know that mistletoe is good for more than just kissing. And consulting with researchers on projects involving immune modulation via mistletoe, hyperthermia, and the ketogenic diet. She lives in Durango, Colorado, where she's joining us from now. Her book, which she co-authored with Jess Higgins, is The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. I have my copy right here at the top of my stack. So if you guys don't have that, or go order that. We'll link that down below too. So welcome, Dr. Winters.
Oh my gosh, what a joy. As we were saying before you started, we had the pleasure of finally meeting at Ancestral Health. Our paths didn't cross at Low Carb USA, but as I was saying before, I just was drawn to you like a fly on honey, sister. You have such a great attitude and energy, and it's just an honor to be here. So thank you.
I love that so much, and I feel the same way about you. So I'm so glad we finally get this opportunity to connect across a few states. So, but we'll be seeing each other again soon, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so okay, so gosh, where do we start? Let's start with your story. How did you get involved in naturopathic medicine? I know it's quite a journey for you to get there. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, I always wanted to go into medicine. I was very interested in medicine and healthcare. My mom said that I would line my bed as a child with all my stuffed animals and doctor all of them.
Oh, how cute.
Right? It was like my thing. But because of my own health issues, I had a lot of health issues growing up. Even just born, they were always considering me the colicky baby, and I couldn't handle any of the formulas because it didn't occur to anyone that breastfeeding might have been a good idea at that time. And so just one major issue after another, and they settled on soy formula, which kind of threw me out of kilter from the get-go, starting my period at 9 years old. This is back in the 80s, for crying out loud. This is not, we see that today. It's almost normal today, which but back then it wasn't. And so I just was set off on kind of the wrong foot health-wise from the get-go, from my microbiome up. So it always had me interested in a lot of aspects of health, but more on the superficial, like exercise, and the idea of eating right was the low-fat, diet and all those crazy things that were just actually worsening my condition.
Yeah.
So by the time I was in college, I had major health issues that it was just so commonplace for me to not feel well that I didn't recognize the symptoms really at hand until about a year of going in and out of the ER pretty regularly. I finally had a doctor who listened, who was present with me. As I know you can relate. We talked about that as well. But that moment that someone thought, we'll look a little bit deeper than just thinking this is a crazy 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And by the time they figured out what was really going on, I had just turned 20 years old. And I was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. So
20 years old.
Yeah, well, actually been going on for a while. So it's definitely my 19th year, but they just kept misdiagnosing me and missing it or not testing appropriately. And by the time I figured it out, I was so far gone. I was in end-stage organ failure. I had massive fluid buildup in my abdomen known as ascites. It was malignant ascites because they could pull the fluid and test it for cancer cells. They on the MRIs at that time, because they weren't doing CT scans where I was, they found lesions on my liver, in my peritoneal cavity, and the primary on my right ovary. And so it was just one kind of hellacious story where they realized that they couldn't go in and do surgery because that was not appropriate for a stage 4. And I was too sick with my organs and failure to do any treatment. And so they recommended hospice.
Wow.
And so that was where I was. And so given just a couple months at best to live. So that was fun.
At that point, what did you feel? Did you feel like, oh, I can't catch a break? Like, I've been sick for so long and this is what happened. Like, what was going on in your mind at that point?
Well, I guess we'll go right into kind of the depths of it. I had been in a pretty dark place for most of my life. I had come from some pretty significant traumas, some abuses, some things I wasn't ready to deal with. A lot of those things were definitely stored up kind of in the pouch of the illness within my body. And I was actually partially, the first response in me was relief.
Okay.
I found this to be a good out.
Okay.
I had been in the place of wanting to do this on my own, like let go of my own life on my own previously. And so it was like, well, this is kind of handy. But I think because I don't know if it's the redheaded stubbornness within me. I don't know what it was, but when someone tells me I can't do something, it kind of kicks up this thing in me. I'll just say it. I mean, my God, it kicks up this sort of, really? I'll show you. And so that's kind of what it did to me. It took me from a place of initial relief to oh, wait a minute. You're telling me I can't do this. So I'm going to do everything I can to prove you wrong. I mean, that's kind of my stubborn streak.
Yeah.
That served me well for almost 27 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually led me, I had a couple of other appointments as I was seeking some other options and other biopsies, other information was gathered, and the story was the same across the board. I was super sick. I could barely catch my breath. I was so sick. And all my organs had stopped basically. So luckily for me, thanks to picking up the book, Deepak Chopra's book, this is 1991, mind you. Okay. While he's relatively new to the scene, Deepak Chopra, I pick up his book, Quantum Healing. I went to the library to start looking at cancer, and this is what I pick up. And in 2 hours, I gobbled that book right down and realized, okay, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on my terms. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm understanding now where this began, and that's where I'm going to focus. So I even changed my college degree. I wasn't telling anybody what was going on with me, as you can imagine. Everyone knew something was wrong because I looked like hell. I was sick. Everyone thought I just gotten fat, but like fat skinny because my abdomen was giant, but I had like bone arms and bone legs and super gaunt and yellow from the jaundice and probably didn't smell really good being in kidney failure and all these different things. So I was a lot of fun to be around, I'm sure. But my personality was such that I could compensate quite a bit. And I actually changed my major kind of in full stream. I was a biology chemistry major and I switched it to psychology with a biology minor and moved at that time into focusing on psychoneuroimmunology. And that is what then led to my undergraduate degree that spilled out when I was looking at going to medical school. I thought, I don't want to be a psychiatrist. I don't want to be a PhD psychologist. I don't really want to be a medical doctor because now I'm seeing that was a dead end. And as I was exploring, I stumbled across naturopathic medicine.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we go from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so there's probably a good portion of the people watching this that don't even know what naturopathic medicine is, or they might have some preconceived notions about that woo-woo witchcraft stuff. Can you just, let us know what it is?
Yep. So, in fact, my grandmother thought I was going into witchcraft when I told her I was going to go to naturopathic school. So I'd crack up that you use that. Still to this day, weirdly, all these years later, despite the fact that it is well established as a board, a nationally board certified medical program, 4-year residential medical school program that requires a pre-med undergraduate degree. And then through your schooling, you take similar board exams to your conventional medical colleagues. So we have to take the basic science boards. You really can't learn biology, chemistry, physiology, pathology in any other way, microbiology, right? Those are kind of across the board. We all had the same base camp training. We also have our clinical boards, which basically show that we are competent in all areas of medicine, and then we can kind of go on and specialize or do residencies afterwards. But ultimately where we differ is in our philosophy and our application. And so ultimately as naturopathic doctors, we believe that the body is fundamentally meant to be well, that health is a natural state of being. And it's the accumulation of sort of hiccups to our day-to-day lifestyle choices that accumulate over time that lead to symptoms of disease.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And we help people kind of rewind the tape back to the place. And some people weren't even born with a place of holism or a place of health. So we might even take them back beyond that to a place they've never experienced health and wellness. And we approach it from a very comprehensive scientific manner. I'm a humongous tester. A lot of people think I'm a bit zealous with the amount of blood tests that I run, but I'm a data person because it also compels people to see where they are and see where they're going and adjust accordingly along the way. I just think it's human nature. So I have that access. My training included obstetrics and gynecology. I delivered 36 babies in my career, minor surgery, prescription rights in states where we carry licenses, IV therapies, you name it. I've kind of done it all, and worked in hospital environments and in pain centers and in run on ER shifts and did ride-alongs with emergency crew, and done a lot of cool work there, but also had the ability to work in some really cool environments like HIV/AIDS, doing an integrative approach, working in addiction recovery centers with an integrative approach, working in geriatrics, working on the reservation. I've done a lot of work on the Dene Nation around me here in the Four Corners, working with blood sugar issues and wound healing issues and things like that. So I've had really broad sweep of education and experience in ways all over this country, but also around the world. I've done internships in India, done in Mexico, all over. I love it. Medicine is my passion. And so to me, it incorporates the old wisdom with the new technologies, and I like it all.
That is really cool. And if I can just insert in here, like my experience and perception of, how naturopathic medicine differs from, I think it was like conventional medical doctors, is that, conventional medical doctors are trained to look at what symptoms is this person having and what medications will treat those symptoms or make the symptoms go away. And then we wait until somebody has a definite disease before we do any other therapies, and whereas naturopathic medicine looks at let's try to understand the root cause of this. What is causing this in the first place, and how do we get at that and support the body's natural healing? That's my experience of the difference.
It's perfect. And the analogy I'll use with colleagues or patients on a regular basis is that, my conventional colleagues wait for the house to be engulfed in flames, whereas I look for the smoldering ember in the basement.
Okay. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And just to be clear, conventional medical doctors are fantastic for emergencies and surgery needs and all these other things like that. So we're not saying there.
Absolutely. And as an integrative oncologist, my work, I depend heavily on their tools, their knowledge, their toolbox, just as they depend heavily on mine. I don't know, maybe I'm a Libra, so I'm totally kumbaya, like we're all like in bounds and holding hands, right? I'm not an either or. I very much understand my strengths and the strengths of my colleagues, and I know how we can weave together in a very elegant dance.
Yeah. that is lovely. All right. So, and speaking of, I'm just going to throw this in here now because there's probably some people watching wondering, your really cool fashion glasses there. So speaking of how things, interfere with our optimal health, can you just share what, I know what they are, but I'm going to have to, because there's a lot of people watching that have no idea. Can you just share what the glasses are, what they're about?
Absolutely. Starting in about May of 2015, my work went from kind of a brick and mortar practice with an office that had all natural light. We were very thoughtful about the light exposure. I had all my little screens, covers, and things for safety with what I was being exposed to what shifted in 2015 is 100% of my time in front of a screen.
Okay.
And in front of a ton of speaking engagements under fake lights and on a lot of travel and whatnot. And going from eagle eye vision, where it was better than 20/20 my entire life, really prided myself getting deep into my 40s without ever even using a set of readers. Suddenly I'm like, what's happening? So I started having to use reading glasses. But what happened with that is it sort of enhanced the reflection into my eyes that much more. And my vision went from fantastic to terrible within a short period of time.
Oh, okay.
The only addition was the blue light from all the screens. So
Okay.
no amount of like eFlux or Iris or any of the other ways of changing the colors on my screens helped, because it was still just 20, I spend a good 15 to 18 hours a day on the computer at times. So luckily, a bunch of companies have come out in the last few years with these blue blocking devices of lenses. And I had been using those, but I was like the crazy old lady wearing my readers with like the big, huge orange lenses over them. Sexy little numbers have gotten a way that they've got readers within them now. So you're seeing my light amber color or yellow color that I wear during the day.
Okay.
And the early morning hours and the late night hours, I have my dark red lenses that really block out all the additional at the times our natural circadian rhythm. So my sleep is better, my hormones are better, my energy is better, I don't have headaches anymore using this, and my vision has completely stabilized and is actually on the mend. So I love these puppies, and as ridiculous as I look at times, it's worth it. It's just the only thing I need now is my tinfoil hat, and I'm totally we're off and running.
And then your grandma's going to be like, see, I knew it.
Exactly. Witch doctor. Yeah.
Well, and it's, it's an area that even in people that are a bit familiar in embracing alternative medicine and complementary therapies and things like that, a lot of people are still not aware that our bodies are designed to react to the sun, and we need sun, because we've been told the sun is so bad and dangerous, and don't go outside and cover up with sunscreen and avoid the sun and all that. So it's something I hope that comes out even more in the coming years as we get this diet thing figured out for people. Then we can go on to the other aspects of what really are important in health. And so well, hey, maybe that's a good segue into, tell us about this optimal terrain thing you've discovered or created or used to optimize.
Yeah. Well, in the first few years after my diagnosis, there was no Dr. Google. There was no internet. There was nothing. There was the Dewey Decimal System. Yeah. And luckily I was a total science geek, and I worked in the library. So I'd spend sometimes, I hope the old college doesn't hear this, but well before all of the video cameras and whatnot, I would spend many nights sleeping in the library, pouring medical text. And some of the first information I stumbled across in the literature specific to cancer was all about good old Otto Warburg. From the 1920s, the biochemist who started to put the pieces together to say that metabolic insufficiency, metabolic damage at the mitochondrial level is the source of all disease, in particular with cancer. So that resonated with me more than the two-hit theory, which was popular at that time in the early 90s of you've got a genetic mutation and then a big life thing comes along and sets it off into motion. I knew it wasn't that simple. Even though I knew my family was wrought with cancer and all kinds of other lovely healthcare conditions, it wasn't intuitive to me. And the means of which, because I wasn't able to take any conventional therapies, simply there wasn't anything available to me, I was left to my own devices. And pouring through all the literature, all my own information, I was able to start to stumble across things that did make sense, did work. So I started to apply them. But go fast forward 27 years to where we are today, just shy of 27 years, I started learning patterns about myself. And then over the years of working in health, because I worked in healthcare industry well before going to medical school, then on and through medical school, and then on into clinical practice. So I've had about 27 years of working with others on top of myself to understand these patterns. And these patterns came down to 10 patterns, which we coined in our book, the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, the Terrain 10. And this is even the name of my consulting firm is Optimal Terrain. And when I talk about terrain, it's what's in, on, and around us at the cellular level, as well as on the macro level of, what's all around you in your environment. And so those 10 patterns include things like imagine your mitochondria are a bucket. Okay. And it's the drops in the bucket that contribute to this. And we all have a different sort of threshold of what overflows our bucket. So things that go into that bucket are things like epigenetics. So these are the things that we are passed down from multiple generations, but we have a lifestyle and dietary choice to impact how they manifest or how they express. So it's not necessarily set in stone, it's dynamic, but that goes into the bucket. So does things with our microbiome. Okay, so does things with our mind, body, our emotional being. So do things like the other 7 factors that we talk about are things like your hormonal balance, your blood sugar balance, circulatory processes, stress and circadian rhythm, hence my glasses, immune function, inflammation, and toxicant exposure. Okay.
Okay.
Those are the things that go into our bucket. So our book is broken down on those 10 patterns, like a chapter on each of those. And we even start the book with the ability for someone to just do their own questionnaire.
Okay.
It's 100 questions. So it's 10 questions per each of the 10 patterns that you can do your own self-assessment to get a sense of what is in your bucket, what needs to be taken care of. So kind of as I told my story, like you could go, okay, definitely some stressors, definitely some, epigenetics likely in there, definitely some microbiome, things like you could almost guess just from this little story I shared with you about my history of what might have been contaminating my bucket from the get-go. We all have the ability to do that. And my mantra is test, assess, address, never guess. And so I can't tell you how many people think they're healthy when they come to me and say, well, I was healthy until I got cancer.
Yeah.
Well, I've looked at hundreds of thousands of labs over 27 years. We're not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
To me, what the bigger miracle is that we all don't walk around manifesting cancer. We all have cancer, but our bodies keep it in track, on task until it doesn't. And so right now, 1 in 2 men and 1 in 2.4 women are expected to have cancer in their lifetime in the United States. So I hope, like you said, in like the book, it should be called, the metabolic approach to cancer, but it's really the metabolic approach to health.
Okay.
Because it's also an ultimate guide on helping people understand what's in their bucket, see if it's actually impacting them and do something about it so you don't become that statistic.
And I want to address one little piece of what you covered there about like, people are probably saying like, well, no, I'm healthy. My doctor says I'm healthy. Like they said, my labs are healthy. So can you help us understand like how you can be unhealthy even though the doctor says you're healthy?
Yes. So first of all, I get all those people saying, well, my doctor says I'm fine. And they just send me a little note saying normal instead of actually seeing your lab. So I'm like, give me the raw data. I want to see the raw data. Now, I've been in practice long enough now to tell you that the raw data has changed a lot over the years. Our lab values today, whether it's from LabCorp or Quest or Diagnose, any of those, are based on the average of the population.
The normal range that they quote, right?
Exactly. That bell-shaped curve is based on the average of the population, and it goes one step further in the region in which it's being tested. So for instance, if I have patients in Colorado, which is up at the top of the list of health in the United States, versus the lab values of people from, say, the state of Alabama, which is at the bottom of the list, the ranges are going to look a little bit skewed. They're going to look a little bit different. So for instance, one person in the US says, hey, you're not diabetic if your blood sugars are under 100, whereas in Alabama, it'll say under 120.
Oh, okay.
Right? This is crazy pants. So what I do and what a lot of my colleagues do in naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, holistic medicine is we look at what's known as the optimal or the functional ranges. So what are the ranges that are going to allow you to thrive and actually prevent disease? What a concept, right? Just like RD nutritionists focus on just enough vitamin C to not get scurvy, right? Yet people like me know that you can treat meningitis, you can treat cancer, you can treat massive wounds with high dose IV vitamin C. It's like, holy cow, it's that same kind of ideology that I'm not just enough to get by kind of gal. It's what is it going to take to get you thriving? When we look at the health disease continuum, Western medicine says that we are healthy if we are without symptoms. I can't even tell you how many people tell me I'm healthy, and I look at their list of pharmaceuticals. I'm like, no, you're suppressed like shit. And they're like, it's just like a smoldering volcano waiting to erupt. And then when it erupts, everyone's like, God, I'm so shocked. It drives me crazy because it makes me sad that we've all been so dismantled of our ability to really know ourselves. So simply getting a basic, even if you get a basic blood count, a basic chem panel, a vitamin D level, a homocysteine level, a hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin level, a full thyroid panel, including the antibodies, a ferritin level. We've been learning so much about how iron overload or iron deficiency can cause major problems. These will tell me right away how many cylinders you're firing on. Okay. Then we can know. And it's great because I did private practice for so many years before I started focusing in oncology. And in our town, and they have them all over the country, we'd have like an annual kind of health fair. And they called them the 9R health labs. So for like $30, you could run almost all those labs I just described. You can get a pretty good thing, right?
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, so my March, April books were always packed with patients coming in for me to look at their labs. I cannot tell you how many diagnoses I made of diabetes, hyperlipidemia, thyroid dysfunction, hormonal dysfunction, malnutrition, celiac, you name it, of all of the types of diseases we would find, and people were quote unquote healthy. They take their GP and they're like, you're fine.
Yeah.
Because they're waiting for the house to be engulfed in flames.
Well, the other thing I've noticed too is that they just look at every individual lab value all by themselves, and they don't put them all together to look at what does that mean if this one's slightly out of range and this one's slightly out of that range?
Carole, you nailed it, because nothing happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right. And so patterns, that's what I go back to again. So, that's that place. If someone's like, well, oh my God, my albumin is really weird. Well, okay, well, let's look in the context of everything else. It could have been a lab mess up. It could have been you were very dehydrated that day. It could be that you're dealing with muscle wasting. It could be you've got some kidney disease going on. There could be a million reasons, but you have to look at the whole rest of the picture to round it out and get your story. And if you don't have all the story, you go digging deeper. Right? That's what that implies. And so when doctors, if they see a few out of range, they kind of just sort of poo-poo it like, oh, this is just normal, and ignore it. Or they qualify it as an individual situation, like it's this, and it's often not. So I like that you brought that up, that you have to look at the whole. Yeah.
Good. And oh man, so it's like I'm making a note of something I'm going to talk to you after we can.
Okay. Good. I love it.
Oh man. Okay. So, all right. So let's go back then. And okay. So you're 20 years old and you've got the Spitfire attitude of like, I'll show you.
I'm still doing that, by the way. So
good. Well, it's why you're helping people the way that you are, and why I can only imagine how many lives you've saved because of the work that you're doing. And, it's great that we have, my story as well is like this adversity, and then through that burning desire to heal our bodies, we get to heal other people as well. And so, the terrible thing that happened to us turns out to be like the gift that we get to give to everyone else in the world. So how did you, you slept in the library, you read every book you could. What was, walk us through like, how did you heal yourself?
Well, I'm still healing myself. I mean, the things I was learning back then and applying then, I would never use today, because we've come now know. So there's so many things along the way, but basically I was a total latchkey kid, completely malnourished. I became a vegetarian at 16, but I lived in Kansas, and my idea of a vegetarian was eating Velveeta cheese and iceberg lettuce.
Yum.
I don't understand why I was so depleted nutritionally at this time. By the time my husband, who was the guy who I started dating at the time of my diagnosis, good Lord, which is kind of ironic of some other conversations, but I'm like, who? So I laughed because I really thought that this 22-year-old was like, cool, I'll be with this gal for just a couple months before she checks out. And then, that is almost 27 years later. It'll be 27 in September. Like the total, love and light of my life. Also a total massive chemistry geek. He also lost his brother. Well, let me say this. His brother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in his 30s. And Bob was also given a few months to live. And Bob, basically, as my husband always says, they gave him 3 months. He gave him the finger and he went down to Mexico. And so that was 24 bonus years that he had with an inoperable pancreatic cancer. Okay. Wow. A death, just like ovarian cancer, death, like you're less than 5% still here at 5 years out. Right. So Bob lived 24 years. He ultimately died of his disease. But it was after 24 years of keeping it intact with a lot of changes to his chemistry, to his terrain, just like I learned along the way. So my husband was already very into this and helping to, feed me, nourish me back into balance, and went on the vegan kick with me for a period of time, which was great, because for me to go from the massive latchkey kid processed food standard American diet to a vegan diet was such an upgrade. to how I'd been eating, that my husband, like, he could sneak vegetables into my boxed macaroni and cheese. And I thought that was blasphemy. And yet it was still far healthier than anything I'd ever eaten in my life. Okay? It's so hard to imagine that that's how I ate back then.
Yeah.
So far, fast forward 7 years of that, I was dying again. I was actually re-cancering in a pretty advanced way, and couldn't figure it out until a Chinese practitioner basically said, "You are starving. You have got to get some animal protein in your body." And I refused to do anything beyond eggs at that time. But the eggs did enough to boost me up that there was such a shift in my blood chemistry and how I felt and how I looked that I listened. A couple years later, I incorporated a little bit of fish. A few years after that, I incorporated a little bit. So I was like learning along the way. And each time I would try and pluck something else out and add something else in. I went along like this. I mean, mind you, it's 27 years now. 2010 is when I finally went 100% gluten-free in January 2010. I'd been half-assing it for many, many years because I knew I felt terrible on it, but I was ignoring it. This is also the time I got my epigenetics read and found out I actually have celiac. Like, what? And RA and the genes for Parkinson's, of which my grandma just passed away from, like all the, I'm like, oh, a few things of as well as understanding that it's a miracle that I hadn't died of cancer multiple times through because of my epigenetics as well as the BRCA status. So over and over again, it was like, I kept living long enough to learn something new to apply and change the terrain. That's the essence. But in 2010, when I went gluten-free, I jumped onto the corn and grain wagon of getting away from gluten and got sicker than ever. And in August 2010, my husband and I committed to going 100% at that time paleo. And both of our lives changed entirely. So it took me from 1991 until 2010 to get my dietary shit together. And even then it's taken more, now we're pretty much mostly keto, more keto cycling, still I don't eat grains. I've had probably rice, I can count maybe on one hand, and since 2010, it's like, these are these things that my body feels better. All my autoimmune stuff, my husband's bipolar stuff, all of his psoriasis, like both of our health is better than ever. Our nieces and nephews always comment on how we look and seem healthier than they are. We're like, well, because we are. Because you guys yeah. So, but this is that place where it's been a long learning process, and I'm still applying things I learn every day. It's why I attend so many medical conferences. That's why I read so much research. I probably read 1,000 research articles a week at least.
Wow, that's impressive.
How my brain works. I just catalog and reference things and constantly taking notes and going there. Plus I live with someone who, this is what we do for fun.
That's cool.
But yeah, I'm still there, right? Because in Western medicine, I never ended up doing a standard of care of any kind. So for me, and my body still carries the cancer. It still holds it intact. It hasn't done anything. It hasn't moved anywhere in many, many, many years now. It's basically walled off and kind of calcified and just doing it, over there. We're living happily ever after together. But I'm still always building upon my terrain. And my labs, my most recent labs I had in October, were frankly the best I've ever had.
Oh, wow.
Like what I shoot for my patients to get, I was like, oh my God, I just did it. I'm 27 years old. So, but I tell my patients, like, I had me 27 years ago. I might've gotten there faster. So I'm telling other people it won't take you 27 years, but it is still an ongoing life process.
Yeah. Well, and I want to just point out as well how remarkable it is that you stay up on research. Most people, I even think that doctors should continually read research, but most of them don't. They learn what they learned in school, and then they just go out and regurgitate that every day, and then they go home and do whatever they do in the evening, right? And so I love that you're doing that, and that's why you're so good at what you're doing and why you're having such an impact on reversing really serious health conditions and preventing them all at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I like it too. It's something I enjoy it, which a lot of people don't. So I can understand that, but it's still a muscle you have to exercise if you plan on being effective in medicine today, because medicine is changing exponentially. More has come out in the last 2 or 3 years with integrative oncology than in the previous 23 years, 25 years collective. So it's like a rocket has gone off. It's like we have enough of the catalyst into the system now that it can react. And it's pretty awesome time to have survived this long and thrived this long to be privy to the data, to the information that's coming out, and knowing that it's still just the tip of the iceberg and we're just going to keep learning more and more.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch gears just a little bit. You mentioned your diet. What, is there one perfect diet for everybody?
No.
Do you,
Yeah. And I mean, I still think, okay, to me, the common denominator of healthy diets across the board looks like this. Real food, number one. Clean food, number two. These are weird things that we have to actually qualify, because I have a sticker on my refrigerator that says eat organic food, or as your grandparents called it, food. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is what's so sad is now they've actually created a new psychology, diagnoses of being someone who over worries about food. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? What industry just paid you to tell people not to worry about what you're putting into their food? That's crazy. That needs its own label of psychoses. But ultimately, you have to be very thoughtful and clever about what you're ingesting. Okay, so that's important. The other thing that's very important is a plant-based diet. Okay, so when I say plant-based, people often think I'm saying vegan or vegetarian. No, I'm saying plant-dense, nutrient-dense, polyphenol dense. That's what I'm saying. So I really like kind of Terry Wall's 9 cups analogy of 3 leafy greens, 3 cups of colorful veggies, and 3 cups of cruciferous veggies. That's kind of the ballpark. I could get somewhere between 9 and 15 servings of vegetables a day. So that is the base camp. And then for me, the next layer that because we've all been on such a fat phobic trip for so long, we're all starving. Okay, our brains are starving, our nerves are starving, our hormones are starving. I think fat would be the next part of that plate, of that food plate, to get quality fat on top of that. And then really animal protein more as a condiment. And I know I've got colleagues out there who are thriving on more carnivorous diets, people who are really shunning a lot of vegetables right now, concerned of lectins and whatnot. But as someone who works with cancer, in myself and others, you have to have those polyphenols. You have to have those micronutrients from your vegetable matter. You need that fiber. You need that for your microbiome. You need all of that to make the whole terrain hum. And so for me, what I see over and over and over and over again in myself and tens of thousands of others is a diet like that tends to work. And then on top is literally that cherry on top. As little sugar as possible. And that, when I say sugar, I mean starchy vegetables, I mean low glycemic, high quality fruit, and I mean maybe the occasional stevia or monk fruit, sweetener. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. And then do you kind of customize things for each person? Like there's variations in more protein, less protein, more vegetables, less vegetables.
Yes, I love that, because definitely the patient population I see is very diverse as far as where they are in the health or disease continuum. Most people are stage 4. Most people are pretty traumatized to their guts. So, a lot of people push the raw food diet on cancer patients, but I'm telling you, in Ayurvedic medicine, 5,000 plus year old medicine, Chinese medicine, 3,000 plus year old medicine, when you're sick, your tube is very depleted. And you cannot, in fact, both Ayurvedic, Chinese medicine, which were also my studies of interest, would say no raw food or cold food ever in that population. So I avoid that unless it's at the heat. Like if you live in a hot climate or you have a hot summer and you've got strong digestive fire, then of course you can get away with some raw, colder foods. But for the most part of my compromised population, I would rather them roasting the vegetables, making them into stews, making them into soups, pureeing them. If they're going to juice them, pour them into like warmed bone broth or even hot water to add to that to make it more digestible and assimilable, if that's a word. So that's a biggie. But definitely, I also look at people's blood tests. So for instance, if the ferritin is really high, which is their iron storage, I'm not going to have them having anything with high iron rich foods. So that means no red meat. Okay, not cooking in cast iron. If they have very elevated insulin growth factor, then we're really foregoing any form of dairy until things are really stabilized, even if it's just pure ghee or butter, like pure fat dairy. So we're really watching out for that and even being extremely mindful of their animal protein sources, because a lot of those, the flesh will carry the insulin. So we want to be very careful with that. Epigenetics, I look at their SNPs, their single nucleotide polymorphisms, and that can show me how they're going to work with a plant-based diet or a fat-based diet or anything else, and if we need to tweak it and alter things to help support them. So if they have some SOD dismutase issues, then I know that vegetables are the key for them to thrive. If they have PEMT issues, then I know that we really need to bring on some digestive enzyme support to help them digest the fats. Those are just some examples. So I'm absolutely fine-tuning. And if they're going through chemo, we might work with like Valter Longo's fasting protocols around that. Or if they're really cachectic, we need some more protein, but it's still a fat-based diet, but we might need to pulse in some higher protein sources to reverse that metabolic wasting process. So hopefully that gives you some clues. I mean, I even have done keto feeding tubes many times in these patients, which is insanely powerful because the hospitals try and give them parenteral nutrition, which is known to speed up demise. Okay. It's known to shorten life. And so we can really fine tune and create a liquid keto program for people who are unable to take things by mouth. Yeah.
So let's dive into that then a little bit of how does a ketogenic diet help prevent, or does it help prevent cancer? And then how does it play into treatment?
So good. Well, back when I was talking about reading Otto Warburg sitting in the library, is our bodies have always been meant to be a hybrid car.
Okay.
A hybrid energy source. I saw a kitty tail. Hi, babe.
Yes.
I have one laying next to me too. So we're
okay.
good. That's good for your medicine too. So, but basically, again, when we think about the basis of all chronic illness today being around how our mitochondria are functioning, that therefore means that that's dependent on the fuel source that those mitochondria are using. So when we look at both ultimate prevention and treatment, what you put into that fuel tank is key. Okay. So just for your listeners to remember that only until, 10,000 years ago was the biggest shift we saw, where we moved from hunter-gatherer into the kind of Neolithic farming, moved into, early agriculturist. But we were still very, very physically laborious. We were still very minimally using planting, utilizing grains. It was more like we started working with more livestock and small things that we could grow year round or live near year round. Then the next big shift to our system came when we went to the 1850s, when we started milling flour and sugar. That was giant. Up until that time, we were averaging about 30% of our diet was carbohydrate.
Okay.
Right? We call today the way I'm talking about eating low carb, right? It's normal carb is what I talk about today. So just delusional, since we have gone from about 5 pounds per person of sugar per year. That included things like honey, fruit, starchy vegetables, and tubers, right? And of course, grains. That was our average. To today, it's an average of 175 grams. So you can see the stress in our mitochondria. We are not a hybrid engine. If a person finishes eating dinner, say 6 p.m., and they get up in the morning at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., they should see if they're metabolically flexible and still burning appropriately. They should trace ketones on their urine stick. If you don't, you have some work to do.
Okay.
And that may be a little extension on your fast. Maybe you go 13 hours. Keep doing, add an hour every day until you see trace ketones, right? And then that might be one place before even altering your diet. Then start pulling out anything excess. Of course, get rid of the liquid sugar immediately. Get rid of any super high sugar fruits. Get rid of all the extraneous grains, especially the inflammatory ones, all gluten, corn, oats. And actually, corn and oats also have gluten. And in this country, we say gluten-free is 20 parts per million. In Europe, it's 5. And oats and corn are over 5 parts per million of gluten. And when you have celiac like me, you are reacting like a mofo to those foods. So stop calling things gluten-free that still contain oat and corn. They're not, okay? So that's biggie. Plus, they're just sugar bombs. They talk about stimulating insulin growth factor. Corn and wheat are the biggest. I mean, how do we fatten our cattle, right? So of course it's going to do that to ourselves. So that's one place they can start to expand upon, is making yourself become a hybrid machine again, because that's how you were meant to be. And for many, if you already have a chronic illness, especially if it's metabolically based, such as cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, any brain neurological issues, cancer, ADD, ADHD, autism, anything on the autism spectrum, okay, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, diabetes, all of these have been associated as mitochondrial diseases. Okay, so I do encourage people to at least give themselves a window of trying to go into a deep therapeutic ketogenic diet to sort of reset the system. Then you can do whatever, what's right for you, working with a practitioner who knows how to pulse that. Just like we did for millennia in nature, we were often in a low grade of ketosis regularly, and definitely deeper depending on the season and our food availability. Let your body be hungry sometimes. It's totally okay.
Mm.
And so those are some things that if I could do nothing else but change how our metabolic engines are functioning, that would be my primary approach, and is my primary approach for having success with any disease. And frankly, your conventional therapies, your chemo, your radiation in particular, glucose and insulin desensitize cancer cells to radiation.
Mm.
What the F? And people are like sipping on their Boost shake or their Ensure shake, and the only thing that ensures is fast death, okay? Which is loaded with also corn starch, corn syrup, wheat. Yeah. I mean, it's about as bad as it gets. And so having that if you're still eating your normal standard American diet during radiation, you are basically taking a very toxic therapy that is known to cause cancer and making it useless. You can use it for good. That is how I work with my integrative, as an integrative oncologist with conventional oncologists, is that I can enhance the outcomes with someone eating this way. Chemo, PARP inhibitors, so a lot of the targeted therapies, many of the chemotherapeutic agents won't work well. The cancer cells are also desensitized to them. And so what also happens when you have a happy mitochondria, which we can restore with ketogenic diet, is that means we also have the ability to apoptose, meaning programmed cell death. And so where people don't respond to conventional therapies means that they've stopped apoptosing. Okay. Mm-hmm. That means their mitochondria are so broken and damaged that it can't do that anymore. And so how better way to do it is to implement a ketogenic diet, even just through your conventional treatment. If you do it no other time, it's going to enhance your response to that therapy.
Yeah. Well, and the research really clearly, I mean, from what I've seen at conferences, the research clearly shows that ketogenic diet plus conventional therapies, enhances everything. Yeah.
You got it. Especially with radiation approaches. I mean, that's such a given. I don't think we can even have that. I mean, luckily I even have conventional radiologists all over the country who now consult with me to know how to implement a ketogenic diet with their patients. That's really an amazing shift. And we have a couple of really good integrative radio oncologists out there blogging and sharing their story and encouraging patients, which is awesome. Like Colin Champ and Dr. Brian Lewinda, these are a few. We've got an incredible woman, Dr. Kesslering out of Chicago, that is also really getting hip to this. These are radio oncologists, you guys, conventional mainstreamers that recognize the ability to use a diet to enhance the impact of their tool of choice, of their tool of study.
That's amazing that we're seeing that shift. And do you have any insights into, because we definitely have conventional healthcare providers of all different mixes, especially in the oncology field, that get very angry about the suggestion that people should try a ketogenic diet. I remember, maybe a year or so ago, a friend of mine tagged me in I think it was a Dr. Seyfried article talking about how ketogenic diet and using for cancer. And one of her friends that happens to be an oncology nurse was very angry about that even being shared, and how dare you suggest that, and don't give people that kind of hope, that there's a way that, so why is it that do you have any insights or thoughts on why do people get so, defensive about like even trying, something like this? Like Rob Wolf has such a good perspective. It's like, well, people have to eat anyways. Like, why not help them eat, how's changing the way they're eating going to be harmful?
See, and I love that, because you get the double-edged sword. At one moment they're saying diet has nothing to do with it, so therefore that should be a license to eat whatever the hell you want. Right. That's one side of it. And then at the same time, like, well, that diet doesn't do it, that diet. I mean, it's just, we're up, it doesn't matter. It's the concept of cognitive dissonance. I mean, really, if you've been trained in a particular way and you suddenly learn that the way you were trained may not be, and I've been up against this a lot in 27 years. Like I said, the way I treat myself now, and even the way I treated my patients when I first started out, I know for a fact that I would have done things very differently with the information I have today. Mm-hmm. But I can't go back then. So I keep moving forward, and I keep trying to educate along the way and make better what I didn't know then within myself and within the patients I work with. But some people can't do that. Some people have to hold on to the outdated mythologies and dogmas, and they're willing to go down on the sinking Titanic with it to protect their wound of I fucked up a lot of people and therefore I have to keep validating that what I'm doing is fine. That is cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
One. Number two, less than 25% of all medical schools are taught nutrition, and it's only offered as an elective.
Mhm.
Okay. So they're not being educated in this. Number three, the people giving nutrition advice in the hospital setting are paid by the hospitals and by the industry. They're called registered dietitians. They're hospitalist dietitians that are fed their knowledge from an industry perspective, not a health perspective. I know I upset a lot of RDs when I say this, but I also know hundreds of RDs who now consider themselves recovering RDs that are out there on a mission. Again, that concept of cognitive dissonance. Learn more. You can do more. You can be a therapeutic nutritionist.
Yeah.
Go beyond preventing scurvy people and actually get into helping prevent disease and treat illness.
Yeah.
And that's where I come against this. So I've been at it so many times, people saying, no, no, no. It's like, I just get to this point where when someone hears maybe my story, it compels them to know, how is this person that by all odds shouldn't be here? Or hundreds and hundreds of my patients who have the same stories. Like you, I think, have interviewed Allison Gannett, maybe. I don't know if you have.
I haven't, but I should.
Yeah, you should, because she's one of my patients who's now almost 5 years out working with me, who was given a terminal diagnosis, who now is a really well-known keto coach and is didn't do. I mean, they couldn't get her entire brain tumor. And so there was still a little bit of him left. And she never did any further conventional therapies. And yet here she is almost 5 years out. It'll be 5 years in August that she is thriving with this guy, and it hasn't moved anywhere, and now teaching others how to do the same. She's but one of hundreds of examples of that in my own practice. But the thing is people won't get it until they decide to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I spent the first part of my practice trying to convince people. That was really hard. That actually put me back into cancering places a lot over the years. I don't do that anymore. And so now with the research, like even Miriam Kalamian's book, Keto for Cancer, she's a dear friend of mine. There were no books. I mean, our book alluded to it. We started talking about it in the metabolic approach to cancer, Jess Higgins, Kelly and I, but we had to focus on the rest because everyone thinks that a diet, that's where you get the bad rap of, oh, the diet isn't enough to kill it. Right. You're right. The diet isn't enough. Right? You've got to take a whole perspective. That's why we wrote our book. But Miriam gives the definitive guide specific to a patient with cancer that didn't exist before her book came out. And
Oh, wow.
And it's loaded with all the research and data. So the next time someone says, oh, it's dangerous, like your friend who came on that, I would send her that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even then, you may not open that parachute, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of this, what about people that say, well, keto makes cancer worse. Keto feeds cancer. There are types of cancers that love ketones.
Right. So I definitely seen this. In fact, I was at a conference with one of my dear friends and colleagues who made this assertion during her talk. And what I didn't have a chance, we were supposed to have dinner that night. We didn't. So I want to talk to her, and I'll be talking to her directly. But where those discussions have come up have been, and I've done all of the research on this and talked with many people that are far smarter than I am in this realm, who can really understand the studies themselves, because I go through and I think I understand pretty well. But ultimately, there's a few things here. The studies are shown, first of all, they're looking at their cell line or animal studies, okay? They're also looking at things in a vacuum without a liver and a body wrapped around it. Okay, that makes a huge difference. One of my colleagues said, you cannot make these assertions if you don't have a liver involved, because it's going to look one way without a liver processing this, making the ketones and processing the ketones, than it does when you're just looking at a cell thing going against hydroxybutyrate. Very different. You can't even compare them. And so the reality is that the fuel source, like I said, we are a natural hybrid engine. And so when we look at some of these studies that talk about this, I don't think there's anything compelling enough to make me think that that's actually fact. Okay. I'm waiting for more good data. I'm always looking, because I do think, like, some people talk about like the BRAF mutation, different things like that. But I've had a lot of BRAF mutation brain cancer and lung cancer patients who are alive and well and kicking today, who did a ketogenic diet well before that information started coming out as a concern. Okay. The same type of thing. When I hear people say, well, my family member did keto and then they ended up dying from the cancer anyway, I'm like, but what the hell else did they do? What else were they looking at? What labs were you looking at? I get so frustrated. You could say the same thing about vegan or the China study or any of these things. It's like, what else was not being dealt with? Perhaps they had an iron overload. Perhaps they actually had some SNPs that were taking their drugs in a different way. I mean, there's so many components to this that I think trying to categorize it as a hit or miss specifically is dangerous. The other thing I want folks to remember is that ketogenic diet has kind of been labeled as, let's just starve the cancer cell of glucose. But people like Adrian Scheck's work has shown that when we look at the 10 hallmarks of cancer, that's just one of the 10 hallmarks. We now know that the ketones, our natural state of being when we're metabolically flexible and have a nice hybrid engine running, impact all 9 other of those hallmarks of cancer to keep things in check. And so it doesn't make sense that we would have had something that came built in to our computer system that could cause this type of harm. But what I wonder is when we're looking at some of these studies, what is the quality of the fat? What is the quality of the nutrient intake? Is someone still eating too much protein? Because I'm betting that that's actually what they're looking at is more of an mTOR issue of too much protein versus a ketone issue. Coming back around. So there's a lot of things I'd love to sit down and tease out every one of them. If I could have a month just to sit down and look at it individually, I think we could probably poke holes in a lot of those concerns. But again, for someone who's clinically been doing it for as long as I have, in every tissue type you can imagine, with extraordinary outcomes, I haven't personally seen it, nor have my colleagues who've really been using this in practice. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think I could question you for the rest of the entire day. But to keep this a nice, a watchable length, I know Joe Rogan does these 4-hour podcasts, and someday I'm going to do one of those.
I'll watch it
live on Facebook or on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Dive in like that. So just in wrapping us up, I'm sure we'll have many more conversations later, and we'll do episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 of this series with Dr. Winters. Just in closing, was there anything else you were hoping that I would ask you about, or that you want to share right now? Or
oh my gosh, Carole, I think you covered so much good stuff here. It was great because I do a lot of interviews right now, and I think you covered some really unique material, and I think we're good.
Good. Well, I try to get into the brain of the audience because I'm one of those people, right? And it's like, what do I want to know about this right now? And weaving all that in. So hopefully, if you guys are watching this, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. You learned a lot here. And but I do have one closing question for you.
Oh boy. All
right. The meteor's coming to the planet. We've got confirmation we're all going to die today. This is it. Your last day on the planet. What's going to be your final meal?
Ooh, golly. Okay. It's funny. You know my brain flashed on immediately? I can't believe I'm going to say this. Mashed cauliflower.
Okay.
I'm a junkie. Well, I love tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of butter and cream and some Parmesan cheese on it. I mean, I want it gooey and creamy and comfort foodie as it can get, but that is funny, with tons and tons of salt and pepper. I don't know why, but that is like my go-to comfort food, and I could eat it by the gallon.
Okay, so like a big giant bucket of it.
Exactly. Well, it's like coming out every orifice I'm diving into when that meteor is on the way.
Maybe a big like hot tub full of it.
Ooh, I like Nice.
Oh, that's funny. That's great. I love that. It's totally unique. I've never heard that.
That's sort of like where my mom said I loved Brussels sprouts as a kid. I was destined to do this, I'm sure.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, that's really awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. I love chatting with you, and I miss you already. What has it been, 6 months or so since we actually met in person? And I'm sure I'll see you at some of the conferences coming up later this year. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing out there. We're going to link below to your site and things like that. Is there anything, quick as far as like following you on social media or anything like that? Your handle or your hashtag or anything?
Sure. So the Facebook pages, we've got one for the metabolic approach to cancer with Jess and I, and Jess also has her consulting, which is Remission Nutrition. And then my consulting is Optimal Terrain Consulting, which is also on Facebook. So you can follow all of the updates and research and where I'm speaking and what we're up to there as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a good one then. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up for now. Again, if you guys learned something, you like this, give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more, bringing you all the great interviews, all the great keto practitioners and success stories that are out there today. So thanks. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Dr. Winters, for being here, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.